Functional Herbal Medicine Podcast. We are your hosts, Kristin and David. So today we are doing a part 2 from our cold and flu topic. So if you haven't seen part 1, which is the last episode we did, then pause now, go watch that one first. We talk about prevention. We gently dip our toes into the germ theory versus terrain theory debate. And then we also talk about how to support yourself when you get sick and some herbalist do's and don'ts. So once you've watched or listened to that one, then come on back here because we're going to talk about the often forgotten recovery process and what is now being termed long COVID. We're going to talk about what's going on there, how you can hopefully try and prevent some of those long-lasting symptoms, and then some ways we can heal if you've got a lingering sickness. So before we get into it, I want to do a little bit of a follow-up of like some of the stuff that we didn't really get a chance to highlight last time, which is the trends that pop up. So we've seen like through COVID, because it's been this novel thing, we've seen a whole bunch of new things pop up, new trendy herbal uses pop up, and we wanted to highlight those because they don't always make sense from a herbalist's perspective. So, David, if you can highlight for us some of the things that we've seen that don't quite make sense.
Totally, yeah. Specifically on the topic of, COVID, this coronavirus, I remember in one of the chat groups I was in, somebody posted this link saying use wormwood as a good natural replacement for ivermectin. If anybody's not or is familiar with ivermectin, it's a anti-parasitic drug it's a Nobel Prize winning drug that's been used all over the world, saved probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives as an anti-parasitic drug. River blindness that comes along with those things. But there's evidence now that's out showing that how effective ivermectin is. And so people were, they're looking for a natural replacement because ivermectin's hard to come by. Also, not getting it from a doctor is illegal. So they're looking for these natural treatments. And a link came through saying wormwood was a good alternative to ivermectin. And even inside the article, it said that ivermectin was originally synthesized from wormwood. So part of me is always a little on the fence when something comes through like that, but I also do a little research on it too. I don't just leave it. I'll kind of look in. I'm interested in herbal medicine, so it's easy for me to do that type of research. And I looked into it, and the data that I saw, it actually wasn't synthesized from the wormwood plant. It was actually synthesized from the soil, and it's from a specific, I want to say bacteria. I'm not so savvy on exactly how it came, but it came from the soil, not from the plant itself. So I had people calling in asking for wormwood, and I'm like, I can sell you wormwood, but it's not how we use it. It is an anti-parasitic, just like ivermectin is an anti-parasitic, but it doesn't have the same actions in the body that ivermectin does. Ivermectin works as an anti-parasitic, but as it goes through the bloodstream, it inhibits binding of the virus. So the virus tries to spread and replicate, and it tries to bind to cells, and it kind of occupies those receptor sites so that the virus can't continue to replicate and spread. And people were saying wormwood was doing that same thing, and it doesn't work. The anti-parasitic action of wormwood is more of that volatile oil that goes through our digestive tract, and it makes the parasites delatch, it almost makes them poisoned or sick. So it's completely different action, completely different constituent. And then part of the concern with trends like this with wormwood is it's a strong diaphoretic, so it breaks fevers, which sometimes we need to do. Fevers can get out of control, they can get really high, we need to bring them down. But a fever is actually a protective mechanism, and we want to encourage a fever as long as it's in the safe range. And breaking a fever too soon at the wrong time only weakens the immune response, which then allows more time for the virus to continue to replicate. So it breaks the fever response. It's really strong diaphoretic. It's very cold energetically. But it's also toxic too. So long-term high dose of wormwood is toxic. It can cause nervous system damage. It can cause liver damage. So there's a whole reason why that trend, and every time I saw it kind of come up, I kind of debunked it for people so that, and especially if they called us here. So yeah, wormwood, Not the same as ivermectin. Don't use it that way. Another one that kind of came up was white pine, is how suramin was a constituent that was shown to be effective at like inhibiting the RNA production in a virus life cycle. So that was on some of the videos that were going around. People were talking about it, and they brought up, oh, white pine needle has suramin in it, which is actually true. It does. However, the studies that were shown to have an effect of suramin on this aspect of viruses was like intravenous drug use. Like people were getting IVs and they were injecting suramin directly into the bloodstream to have this effect. The amount of suramin that you're getting in a cup of white pine tea is minimal. It might boost your immune system with vitamin C. It has an expectorant action. However, if this is kind of like a life and death situation and somebody's like, well, I'll just drink a cup of white pine needle tea, it can be risky at that point. Also kind of gives a bad taste for herbal medicine. So those are two trends of the recent terms I've seen at the shop for sure.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you for that overview. I think the important thing to remember for people is like these are, like we call them herbal medicines for a reason. Like there are lots of gentle ones that you can use and not really worry about, but something like wormwood in particular, like it's a really strong medicine. And when someone is just taking it like in an uneducated, uninformed way, unsupervised way, like you can ultimately cause an imbalance within your body. And then like the flip side of that is like if you're using herbs in the wrong way, it totally gives herbs a bad name. Like you're like, why doesn't this work? Well, it's because you're using it for the wrong thing. It's not meant to work in that way. So yeah, it can end up making people wonder why the herbs aren't working. So one thing that I like to lean on and what can help inform your choices when it comes to these trendy things is like, does it stand the test of time? So obviously David's highlighted some research, like it exists. So there's research, but when there's this like new and novel way to use something, like it's worth it to be wary because herbs are not new. Technically, like getting sick with the flu is not new. Okay, yes, it's a new expression of a coronavirus, but it's not new. Getting sick isn't new. So when we like find these new and novel treatments, like it's worth it to be a little bit wary of like, is this a valid treatment? Are we clinging on to like one little shred of evidence? Or does this truly stand the test of time? Is it backed up by other herbalists? Have we used it over years? And a lot of our evidence is anecdotal from observations over long periods of time, which I think makes it incredibly valid. So it's like, is this stand the test of time? Is it used broadly by other herbalists? These are hints that it's a more likely to be an effective treatment for you. So when we look at stuff like elderberry, which is, okay, it's a gentle medicine, but there is research that backs it up and it totally stands the test of time. Many herbalists use this and have found it to be an effective and safe treatment for people. Something like astragalus, there's research on it. It stands the test of time. It's been used in like thousands of years in Ayurveda, this is a Chinese medicine herb. So it's been used for a very, very long time. Many herbalists use it. There's research to back it up. These are safer and more reasonable avenues to go down before you try the trendy thing that's just popped up that people are kind of just like clinging on to because there's something new going on and a little bit of a heightened fear state. So I think from there, that's really what I wanted to cover from last time. If all of this sounds like new to you, again, go watch that first episode. We get into some really good details about like that acute phase. So for this episode, we're going to focus on the recovery process. After you get sick, what do you do? So there's this term, we call it convalescence. I hadn't heard this word until I went to herbalism school. This is like, it's often forgotten. It is not something that we talk about. We usually get over our cold and flu. We go back to work immediately. So David, if you can you explain to us, like, just briefly, what is convalescence and like why do you feel it's important?
Yeah, I'm like you actually. I had never heard of that word until, herbal medicine school. I took 2 years of nutrition and never even heard the term convalescence. I wonder, I'll give my definition, my personal definition, which was kind of broad and layman, if you will, but I wonder if convalescence back in the day was with these really, really strong infections that people used to get. Like one of the main killers in the West prior to like antibiotics was scarlet fever. And scarlet fever, ultimately, it's a bacterial infection. It's not necessarily, it might start as a virus thing, but leads into a bacterial thing that causes kidney damage. Not to go down that tangent, but those had like that type of illness with that high fever and it's spreading to the kidneys. It was really draining on the person. So when they were going in convalescent, it was like they literally couldn't get out of bed. So they were like, they're in convalescence. But I think it's important to use the definition broadly in the sense of we get sick, our bodies are going through something, clearing out, cleansing, and we need to take time to rest and recover. So that's convalescence, taking space, not just to be sick, and then once sickness goes, we just get back to work. We actually take a day or two when we're feeling a little bit better and continue to rest, continue to nourish, and start that rebuilding process. Because ultimately that virus is it's a catabolic process. Like the body's breaking down, it's breaking down virus particles, and then with the SARS-CoV-2 virus, a big component of that was the virus was replicating so much in certain areas, specifically lung tissue. At least this was the official narrative. Things might have changed, but the virus was replicating so much in the lung tissue that once the immune response caught up to it, the immune system was just get rid of this virus, and it was actually attacking lung tissue. So it was actually attacking the body, which that's a whole other aspect of the catabolic process and things breaking down. Is we need to recover, and it's natural for our own cells to die off in this process, but it's an opportunity to rebuild and nourish. So I personally think it's important because it's the balance of yin and yang, something we talk a lot about at the shop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that, with all of that. So essentially, just to kind of put that in a neat little package, is convalescence is the process of recovery. And so no matter who you are, you need to convalesce. And right now we're specifically talking about illness, but this is true for pretty much any stressful event. So like on the micro or macro level, it's like a small event. That could be exercise, right? You go and you stress your body and tear tissue. You need a recovery process after that. It's true for like if you've ever moved house, you know how exhausting that is. It's a big event, and then you kind of feel a little bit tired and a little drained afterwards. You need to build the energy back up. So this is true in all many areas of life, but yeah, specifically in illness, we're talking about you get sick. There is like David said, there's a catabolic process that's happening during that illness. Your body is actively breaking down cells. It's going through the process of apoptosis. It is eliminating the stuff that it no longer needs. So it's an opportunity for your body to like really clean house. So naturally after that, we need a regeneration phase where we kind of ease back into things. And often you'll see it in a cold and flu where you have no appetite during it. During the acute phase, your body doesn't want more food to build stuff. It's a normal function of the body and a sign of that breakdown state to not be hungry. So your body's focusing on eliminating and like clearing things out. And so that's where the resources of your body are going over digestion and tissue building. So that's what the convalescence phase is for. And then the appetite will return. And this is where like the body truly needs some good nourishment. So yeah, that's what we're going to talk a little bit about what that exactly looks like a bit later on in the podcast. But first we will talk about what happens like when you're not really recovering. So even if you've given yourself a couple days of convalescence, but you're still fatigued, you're still having symptoms, even long after you test positive or test negative if you're doing that testing. So what we're referring to here is post-viral syndrome, or now what is being called long COVID. So you've heard of long COVID? I'm sure everyone's heard of it at this point. I would say, like, it's not new, right? You know about post-viral syndrome. This is something that's existed for as long as we've had illness. Yeah, it can occur after any illness and not just COVID. So long COVID, I think, just got a special name because it essentially added to the fear of what is going on. It gave us another thing to fear COVID for. I think that's really what it came down to, because post-viral syndrome is not new. The cool thing here, though, is that before there was little to no explanation as to why someone would have these lingering symptoms. It was like a confusing process to people, like when your doctor didn't really know why this was happening. So now that there's more research being done, there's people connecting different dots, and so now it's being largely attributed to histamine metabolism issues, which can be labeled as histamine intolerance, and something called Mast Cell Activation Syndrome, which is sometimes referred to as MCAS, MCAS. And this goes way, way beyond COVID. It is, not something that is only associated with getting sick, but there's definitely a good argument out there that says those with histamine intolerance or like pre-existing mast cell activation are more likely to have a larger inflammatory expression when they do get sick. So that means the cytokine storms, or like more likely to see a severe illness. And it is highly correlated. So the occurrence of MCAS is highly correlated with the occurrence of long COVID. So this is kind of, I think it's a really neat way to express the complexity of what can go on after an illness, essentially.
Maybe, it's interesting that you bring that up. And yesterday at the shop, I had a mom coming in to get a formula for her son. He's a teenager. And he has asthma. I kind of got a little bit of the backstory. At 2 years old, she said he got a cold, and that's when the asthma started. And now he's, 14. And every time he gets sick, and this is the experience the last 2 months, is he gets sick, and then his asthma flares up, and then he's got this long-standing asthma kind of response, and then he gets sick again. He's not even fully recovered, and he's sick again. And so we're working on the formula. Most of the formula is working on, we're using echinaceas, we're using bronchodilators. Not to get too far into that, but I'm curious for you to kind of expand on what's happening there, because we do know, obviously, viral infection is an immune response, and then asthma, for people out there to understand, how that is involved with the immune system and what's kind of happening with histamine or mast cell activation in that aspect.
Mm-hmm. So I'll give you a quick definition of what mast cell activation is in the body, because it'll help us to understand how it can occur from an acute illness. So mast cell activation, it involves your mast cells, which are a part of your innate immune system. So they are sort of on the front line of defense, constantly monitoring the environment to send out signals. Mast cells contain thousands of inflammatory mediators, one of them being histamine. So mast cells have many different actions that they can cause, that they can essentially enforce on the body, and it works through these inflammatory mediators. And this is the complex thing about mast cell activation, is that it tends to not show up the same in any two people, because it really has to do with, like I said, the mast cells they're totally ubiquitous throughout the body. They are at the end of every single nerve cell. They're in every single tissue. So it really is about your body, and essentially your weak spots tend to be where it manifests. So I tend to think of mast cell activation syndrome basically as an umbrella term for patients who have inflammatory responses that span multiple systems in the body. So it will affect it'll affect the neurology, it'll affect the cardiovascular system, the gut, the skin. So it spans many systems. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to hit all of them, but it's sort of like that's what the term is describing. It's inflammation across multiple systems. In the long COVID area, it can often look like chronic fatigue, brain fog. People tend to start exhibiting like POTS symptoms, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia. So it's like when they stand up, all of a sudden they are feeling like their heart beating in their chest, or they're starting to feel lightheaded. That can translate to heart palpitations. Tinnitus seems to be a really common one. So it's like these, and then of course changes in the gut and the microbiome. That's a super important one to note. So it's, like I said, inflammation across multiple systems and not the same in any two people, which makes it a really complex thing to kind of nail down. But when we look at it from the big picture and we understand the function of mast cells, we can really see how it's like weaved into all of these different systems. And this is why like people tend to go undiagnosed, or it's really just like the language is just coming out for this, because it's highly complicated, right? We tend to like to think of things in a really linear fashion where it's like, oh, very clearly like this caused this one symptom, but it is not like that in mast cell, because it touches so many different systems and totally ubiquitous throughout the body. So mast cell activation definitely has a long list of symptoms, and so it can look a little bit different in a post-viral versus like if this is something that you innately have within you. And like the triggers are different for everybody. So for some people, it can be vaccination. For some people, it can be acute illness. And for some people, it can be about environmental triggers. So something in your environment like mold. Honestly, this requires its whole own podcast. So I feel like we'll have to revisit this sometime later. But in the context of like your patient that you were talking about or that you saw in the clinic, so something like this occurs really. I tend to think of it like almost like a complex PTSD of the immune system. So it's like there's something that's occurred where your body, during acute illness, your body goes into like all hands on deck, right? Your immune system is highly active, or that's the ideal situation, is that your immune system is highly active and your body is actively clearing things out. If that process gets disrupted for whatever reason, like I said, if there is like an underlying immune dysregulation already, whether that's from vaccination or environment or whatever, or if there is like, actually I think usually there's something already going on. I think it's unlikely that an acute illness all by itself would cause this, but we don't live in vacuums. We live in polluted environments. We're inundated with chemicals and toxins. So I feel like there's usually always something going on already. But what occurs is the immune system gets stuck. So the immune system gets stuck on high alert where your mast cells are hyperreactive. And then at any sort of potential threat, which can look like, again, acute illness, but it can also look like stress. It can look like just general stress in your life. It can look like even like circadian rhythm disruption and blood sugar imbalance. These things can essentially drive it. But yeah, your immune system gets stuck on high alert, and then your mast cells are just constantly dumping these inflammatory mediators, sending the signal out to the rest of your body that something is wrong. So yeah, essentially if you are like if you're sensitive and you have a little bit of everything, this is the category you end up getting lumped into. Because we see these things where it's like a little bit confusing. You don't necessarily have a singular diagnosis that people can put you into the category of, and then you just tend to see these like inflammatory reactions that don't look like they have an explanation. But it is like like I said, when you step back and look at like the big picture, you can see that like how the immune system gets stuck in this heightened state, and then you have this long inflammatory reaction. So the good news is that people do get better. It can be supported. People tend to get better over time anyways, like you mentioned with that patient. It's like a period of inflammation, and then it tends to go away. But there are definitely things that we can do to support the body, like in either clearing out the stuff that it didn't get to clear out, and that's why it's still stuck, or it could be that there is like a nervous system component that you really have to tend to. Like I said, if you're really highly stressed, it's going to translate to a lack of safety in your body, and your immune system will respond as a result. So does that make sense? Does that kind of answer that?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I know we're going to get more into the details of it, like the solutions, I guess. But what are, because I know you've seen patients in clinic, in your private practice with MCAS. What is like before we do our solutions, what holistic medicine, herbal medicine offers, like what are you seeing that conventional medicine is offering? Like what's their solutions at this point? Because, like the first thing that pops in my head is antihistamine. But what other thing, like tell me about that, or like what other things you're seeing in there?
That's an awesome question. So that is common. People are being recommended antihistamines, which can come in two different forms. There's H1 and H2 blockers. The H2 blockers will block stomach acid, so they'll interact with your stomach. Okay, so let me back up here. H1 and H2 blockers, they will block the histamine receptors, which means that when your body dumps histamine, it can't interact with those receptors, and you don't feel the allergic response that happens as a result. The one problem with this is it doesn't get to the root cause, which is, one, why are you dumping all that histamine? And two, why aren't you able to clear it from the body? Because we do have innate mechanisms through which we break down histamine. So that, I mean, there are immune therapies. In the past, they would have used biologics, which I don't think are an amazing option. There is like discussions of low dose naltrexone, which I think has had some promising benefits for people, but ultimately, like the doctors who are really paying attention to this, they're starting to lean on natural therapies as well. So they use on, actually, I was just listening to I don't know, some guy who does his research. He was talking about how often what we see is something called hypovolemia, which is like essentially a lack of volume in the blood. So he's saying this attributes like a lot of the POTS or orthostatic hypotension, that kind of stuff. So they're using like intravenous saline, they're using IV vitamin C and magnesium. They haven't quite gotten onto the herbs yet, which I think they would find a lot of benefits with their patients if they also did do these, because they are like non-specific. They speak to the body in a different way versus often our conventional medications and drugs tend to be really pointy. They try and like really push the body in a specific way, and ultimately, like, we find more benefits when we help the body find its own balance. So we're not shoving the body in a specific direction, because that can cause its own pushback from the body. It can cause its own like fallout, essentially. So yeah, those are some of the things that are seem to be most commonly used in the conventional world. I will say with those antihistamines, what I was going to say before is they do sound like a really nice, neat solution. It's something that I have seen a lot of people recommend, but I will say that these things they're not great long term. So if you need it in an acute setting, histamine, it does cause excess stomach acid, so it could be a reason why you're experiencing reflux. So if you absolutely need this, like one of the H2 blockers, which looks like Pepsid, if you need one of those in an acute setting, fine, go for it. This is not suitable for long-term use because it blocks stomach acid, which will harm your digestion. That basically sets the stage for dysbiosis, leaky gut, which obviously contributes to higher allergic responses and like food sensitivities. So it's not something that we want to do over the long term. And it's actually same with the H1 blockers. So those are like your Claritins, the antihistamines that tend to like make you a little drowsy that you'd really use for allergies. That's in this category. And over a period of time, they will affect your ability to make something called DAO enzyme. And DAO enzyme is our primary pathway of breaking down histamine. So when we lean on antihistamines for a long period of time, we are essentially creating a greater chance of allergy and this like histamine intolerance over time, because we're essentially harming our body's ability to deal with histamine loads, which are totally normal, right? It's part of our inflammatory mediators. Histamine is a neurotransmitter. It is essential in the body. The goal is not to get rid of it. It's not to say histamine is always bad. We needed it. There's a reason why it's in our body. So we're not trying to eliminate. It's really about being able to balance and then being able to break down whatever histamine load that we actually do have. So before you go and grab yourself some antihistamines to deal with a histamine intolerance or mast cell activation, definitely check in with your primary care practitioner, check in with your natural care practitioner if you have both. Because there are totally options for you and stuff that will not affect your gut and like affect your allergic response in a negative way over a long period of time. Hey everyone, Kristin here. I hope you are enjoying this episode of this podcast and getting some really good value out of it. This is just going to be a quick interruption to let you know about a cool event coming up if you are interested in learning more about Mast Cell Activation Syndrome outside of the context of long COVID. It is such a huge topic that we can really only scratch the surface in this episode here today. So I'm going to be hosting a full MCAS masterclass in early 2023 to really break down this complex topic and to give you some actionable steps that you can implement right away to start feeling better faster. So if this is something that you're interested in, then I highly suggest that you get on my email list. That's where I'm going to be sending out all of the details for this masterclass. I will also be providing my email list subscribers with a discount code for webinar tickets. So to do this, you need to head over to Instagram and find the link in my bio. I'm at Functional Herbalist. So click the link in my bio, you'll scroll to the bottom and you'll find a spot to put your email in. That will get you on my email list and I'll be sending out the details in a couple of weeks. So let's get back to this episode. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And I hope you enjoy the rest.
Totally. I was actually thinking of a story as you were kind of breaking that down for me, and I was going to share the story, and then you answered exactly where I was going to go with this. But I have a client this was years ago, a client that was taking like Advil PM or whatever. And so, you know, it helps you sleep. That's why they give it to you. It relieves pain, but it makes you tired. And the active constituent in there is an antihistamine. It's one of the older antihistamines that cause sedation. But the client had like a flare of allergies. All like he was taking it regularly, and then the next thing that happens, he had this huge flare of histamine. He was just allergic to everything all of a sudden. And that you explained it. It's that DAO. Yeah, that's pretty cool you brought that up. And then just wanted to tag one other thing before we move into the solutions is you mentioned like go talk to your primary care physician, talk to your natural care physician. I picture these rich people in this world. They don't just have one doctor that they go to and they go into a walk-in clinic. Like, tell me what's up, doc. Tell me what I need. They have a whole team around them that they have like a personal trainer. They have a nutritionist. They have a doctor. They have a whole team. So go out and build yourself a team too, right? Like we're lucky enough, blessed enough, if you will, to have access to all these things. So get your primary care physician, get their input, but then maybe get a naturopath, maybe get a herbalist, and build your team around you. Even get, the personal trainers or like somebody that works on energetics, because it does give you a perspective of everything versus just the one treatment. I'm a herbalist. If people come to see me in clinic, I might give them suggestions on supplements, but I tend to just be very pointed with herbs because that's what I do. So on that note, maybe what are some of the primary, you mentioned DAO, what are some of the supplements you use or herbs you use to kind of start addressing this MCAS or, the allergic response, if you will?
Mm-hmm. So I would say first and foremost, nourishment. That is number one. So whether you're just like casually convalescing and you're going to be just fine, or you're like in this long COVID post-viral syndrome, like your number one thing that you need at this time is nourishment. So make sure you're getting whole foods, get them cook them so that they're easy to digest. But that's more important than anything, because we need to give our bodies the tools in order to build back the tissue. And part of this MCAS thing is that we get stuck in a state where the body doesn't feel safe, and that can be a result of, it can be due to there not being enough nourishment in the tissues. Your body senses you don't have enough energy to deal with stressors. So one thing that you can do to calm your nervous system and your immune system down is just making sure that you're getting amazing nourishment. That looks like whole foods. It looks like warm cooked foods, seasonal foods, animal organs, beef organs. You don't have to eat them. You can get them in capsules. Essential. These are bioavailable essential nutrients that your body needs in order to rebuild. Something else that I love doing is mineral-rich herbs. We talk about it all the time at the shop. We've got a huge jar of just mineral-rich herbs that we dispense out of because we use them so often. But that looks like nettles.
Okay, we had a jar. It's all gone.
Oh, it's all gone now. But it's amazing. Really, even just something as simple as nutrient-dense herbs, steeped in the right way to get the minerals out of them. These can make a huge difference just with energy levels, hydration, pH levels, which massively changes the way that you feel in your body, the pain that you feel in your body, even getting digestion moving in a better way. So I would say that is foundational. It doesn't matter who you are. I feel like you can benefit from those things, and even sensitive people can benefit. So often people with mast cell activation or histamine intolerance tend to be a little bit more sensitive than the rest of the population. So a little bit for the MCAS people will feel like a much larger amount. So these are really super safe things that basically anyone can do. The herbs that I lean on tend to be anti-allergic, mast cell stabilizers. I love Chinese skullcap, ginkgo, feverfew. These are some of my top favorites. Oh, reishi is amazing. It's a great anti-allergic. It's also an adaptogen, so it helps manage that stress response as well. And then I think like blood building. So that's an important part of the recovery process. Blood in Chinese medicine is essentially made up of fluids and nourishment. So you need both in order to make blood. So that's why, again, like the food and the organs and the mineral teas, these are foundational. But yeah, herbs like Angelica sinensis, which is a Chinese angelica, that can really help to like build the body back up and return resiliency. And like another good one is Romania. Oh, I feel like I could go all day on these. So there's other categories we'll have to get into, because I think that they're also beneficial for just about anybody who's coming off of a sickness. One thing I want to say about supplementation before we move on to another area is there is a big difference between whole food and synthetic vitamins. So if you can opt for the whole food version every single time, that's why I recommend organs over multivitamins, because they are bioavailable compounds already in there. So vitamins we often think they're like, I don't know, we think of it like it is just this one single compound, but vitamins are like a complex of compounds that are all put together. So like when you're dealing with like vitamin C, for example, this is a great example. If you go and get those like NRC tablets, you know what I'm talking about? They're like vitamin C tablets. These are not whole food vitamin C. These are ascorbic acid. And they're not the same thing at all. They will not do the same thing in your body. So whole food vitamin C is the whole thing. It's got, you can't functionally separate vitamins and minerals. They are together. They work in synergy together. So a whole food vitamin C contains all of these complex what am I trying to say? There's a word in here that is missing from my brain.
Are you thinking like coenzymes or cofactors / micronutrients? I mean, that's kind of what I picture with like a vitamin C supplement versus like a whole food base, is that it's got all these other things alongside it that help with the absorption. Like for example, a vitamin C tends to have now bioflavonoids inside of the vitamin C supplement because it helps with better absorption. So just the vitamin C alone, not so absorbable, not such a great absorption, but then now they're tacking in bioflavonoids, which help. So these are like cofactors or coenzymes that help.
Mm-hmm. Yes, totally. So yeah, that is exactly what I'm saying in more detail, really. So it's like vitamins are complex compounds and they have all these different pieces to them. So if you can think of like whole food vitamin C as a car, we all know what a car looks like. It's got complex pieces. You could have the shell of a car, but in order for a car to run, it has to have an engine and it has to have wheels, and you have to be able to have a steering wheel so that you can work the car, right? So there's all these pieces within the car that is not just the outside shell. Whereas ascorbic acid, you can think of it as just being the outside shell. It doesn't do the things that whole food vitamin C does. It doesn't have the, like you say, like the minerals, the coenzymes, like it doesn't have all the pieces that make that car run. So before you go out and get yourself supplements, think about where you can get that from whole food, nutrient dense forms, because synthetic vitamins, like I say, they don't contain those other trace minerals. So your body will essentially pull from your tissues in order to provide that car shell, the ascorbic acid, what it needs in order to function within the body. So essentially when you take synthetic vitamins, you're relying on and depleting the body's own mineral reserves. So when we're convalescing, we don't want to do the things that are going to put us off in a worse off position because we're stealing stuff from our tissues. So I just want to put that out there. This is I think a really important note because people tend to layer on the supplements. It's sort of the way we think about and teach about natural health tends to be brought down to oh, you need these different vitamins. But we need to start asking the question, where do I get that in a whole food form versus going out and buying that supplement, because it really will change the way your body interacts with it. And there is a real nourishing one and one that actually ends up stealing stuff from your tissues, which is the stuff we don't get a lot of. So the big one is for vitamin C, it's copper. You need to have copper within the vitamin C in order for it to function in the way that you want it to and to be an antioxidant. And we also don't get a lot of bioavailable copper from our other foods. So it's when we are having ascorbic acid, we're depleting this bioavailable copper, which sets the stage for greater imbalances. So all that to say, get your whole food vitamin C rather than relying on synthetic supplements.
Definitely. And on that copper note, I know a symptom of depletion in copper or low copper, because that can happen with zinc supplementation too. We will stop absorbing copper. A symptom is low immune function. So you're in a sense setting the tone for depleting your immune system even further. I'm right there with you. It's all, that's why I tend to lean towards herbs. And, now I'm on the beef organs since you brought them into the shop, because it's whole foods, it's natural. It's like the animal form of herbal medicine in my mind. So totally. I mean, we're built to get stuff from our environment. I think that's the magic of herbal medicine. They're complex. We are complex, right? There's thousands of compounds within a herb, whereas in this supplement or medication, there's a very limited amount of those. They're not necessarily layered, and they're synergistically. They're synthetic and man-made, so they're just not going to give us exactly what our bodies need and are looking for. So, okay, just some things that popped into my head. Sorry, I'm going to just keep going on my rant. If you're a mast cell person, a low histamine diet can really be beneficial for you. I would say this should be temporary. We don't want to permanently eliminate food, whole food groups out, but it can be really helpful in getting things back on track. Some people take DAO enzyme as an external supplement. You can also get DAO enzyme in a beef kidney supplement. So where we create DAO in our gut, in our kidneys, and in our ovaries. So we can use actually a beef kidney to introduce some DAO into the body. And I think that covers it for all of my MCAS hot tips. And then I think, sorry, go ahead. No, sorry about that. I was just going to say on the adaptogen immunomodulator aspect, that can be part of the MCAS response with you mentioned reishi mushroom, for example. But with the chronic fatigue that comes along with things, or the post-viral fatigue, a lot of those adaptogens are also antiviral as well. So it's kind of you're getting that dual aspect with herbal medicine. You're building the immune system, but it's also acting as an antiviral at the same time. And, some of them are actually reducing inflammation as well.
Mm-hmm. So on that note, I think adaptogens are beneficial for just about anybody who's in their recovery process. This is something that we highlighted in our part 1 quite heavily in the prevention stage. So during the months of September to May, if you feel you are, potentially being exposed to stuff and have a concern about getting sick, whether you're in the prevention phase or the recovery phase, these things can be really beneficial. I would say some of the main categories that I would use in this, actually both, so recovery and prevention, although I'll leave the prevention aside because we already covered that. But I will say like adaptogens, super helpful, which usually includes some level of immune modulation. Liver herbs are really important. And then I would say anything that supports the nervous system is the words I was trying to find. The nervous system, because like I said, the mast cells are intimately connected. And I'll say like the Mast Cell Activation Syndrome is just a heightened expression. This is something that we all have. Like we all have mast cells. We all have inflammatory responses. Mast cells aren't necessarily inactive in a healthy and normal person. Like they're doing their job. It's just in mast cell activation cases, it tends to be a little bit heightened. So this information is good regardless of like, if you're struggling a little bit or you're struggling a lot. So yeah, the mast cells are interconnected with the immune system. It's kind of like the weaving of the immune system and the nervous system. So as much as we can keep the nervous system calm, it will also help to keep the immune system a little bit calmer. So what are let's go into like your favorite adaptogens, and then let's talk about some liver herbs.
Totally. Astragalus is like my main go-to for post-viral fatigue, but you can use like Siberian ginseng. I tend to be the more, I don't want to say cautious, but like tiptoe type herbalist, where I see Siberian ginseng, rhodiola, panax ginseng. I see these are way overused in our society, like especially like post-viral fatigue, because those are all stimulating type adaptogens. So I tend to lean away from them, but there's a good time for them. There's certain clients where I'm like, Siberian ginseng makes more sense right here, but it's almost always an astragalus or a reishi mushroom. All of the mushrooms, I use those mushrooms before and after a cold to really rebuild. I mean, not to mention like a natural source of vitamin D, for example, comes from mushrooms. Mm-hmm. But regardless, those would be my main adaptogens. And then liver herbs, yeah, moving the liver, like dandelion root, milk thistle, stuff like that.
Totally. Yes, so I was recently reading a research article so it's interesting you brought up rhodiola, because I was reading a research article on the efficacy of adaptogens in this long haulers area. And they used rhodiola, they used Siberian ginseng, and they used schizandra. And I think of these all as being like pretty intense. Like they are stimulating. Like a lot of people don't find Eleuthero to be very intense. I find it to be like, for the wrong person, it's really stimulating. And same with schizandra. So they did find that that combination of herbs did reduce chronic fatigue and pain in the body. So yes, they work. However, it's not the only options. And it is interesting. The research tends to lean towards the more intense ones. And I would say if you are a sensitive person, worth it to not start in those places and to start in like a more gentle place. Even astragalus can be stimulating for some people. So that's why I really love like Romagna as an intro, because it helps to like really build the blood, and it is an adaptogen as well. So it kind of helps you maybe to get to the point where you could use something more like schizandra or astragalus if you're a sensitive person. And then again, like the liver herbs. I would say milk thistle. If you're a sensitive person, start there. But schizandra is amazing because it is an adaptogen. It boosts the phase 1 and phase 2 of liver detox. So it is helping you really clear out the liver and hopefully getting your body to feel like there's less of a burden on it. And then of course, I would say artichoke is my favorite one. I just think it's the best.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Good point.
And then other things that help are just stuff that like we can do some symptom management off of your individual presentation. So like, especially people who have mast cell activation, they really have long COVID. We can basically look at what are your symptoms, what system are they affecting, and then we can support based off of that. So like, is the gut messed up? There's so much we can do with that. I think looking at how the gut is working in the microbiome is essential, because it really, like, over time, that drives immune dysregulation if you have a constant dysbiosis. If there's cardiovascular symptoms, or if there is stuff in your neurology, like there's so much different herbs out there. Like, there's so much we can do to help your individual presentation. And that's really just about working one-on-one with a herbalist that can accurately match your symptoms to some herbs that will be beneficial to you. And then anything that promotes balance in the body, anything that helps you manage your stress, anything that helps you create a clean environment. So that can look like blood sugar stability, circadian rhythm, getting good sleep, making sure you're moving your body in like consistently, but in also a safe way where your body doesn't go into massive fight or flight modes. And then, like we just said, the liver, like we need to also promote the function of drainage pathways. That's not just done through herbs. We can also do like castor oil packs, which support the liver clearance as well as lymphatic system. Dry brushing, rebounding, these support the lymphatic system, which is our like master waste remover. Without our lymphatics, stuff gets stuck in the tissues. And really in the long COVID, we see like a lot of edema. So like swelling, it is a function of histamine to like open up the capillary beds so that fluids and white blood cells can move through. So, which is where a lot of like the hypotension, like the POTS stuff, and tinnitus, even edema, where all that comes from. So, move your lymphatic system, get out there, breathe, activate your diaphragm, get in nature, ground, do all the things that build your foundations, because those are, like, especially in complex and chronic illness, like the foundations are the things that are going to make the biggest difference for you. I think that's my rant. So anything else for you to add there, David?
No, I think you hit it, at least solutions based. I mean, the only thing that was going through my head is that in that study with rhodiola, schizandra, and Siberian ginseng, like, it makes sense that they would use like these strong pointed herbs, because it's mostly like a mindset, right? It's not about like, it's our mentality or our psychology to like use something strong, hard, fast, let's get a solution quickly to resolve the problem, versus like what we're kind of advocating here, which is take some time, rest, use the nourishing herbs, build, which it is a longer process, but the overall end result, at least in our opinion, and maybe the holistic model, is the long-term results will outweigh the faster, quick response. I'm not surprised it was rhodiola, schizandra, and Siberian ginseng. Quite funny, but totally. And I saw some other trendy stuff that's happening like conventional medicine and in the holistic world, but that'll be just for another conversation. And great podcast.
Definitely, yes. Don't get distracted on your journey looking for quick solutions. It's the long ones that you don't even know are working that are creating the long-lasting change in the body. And like, usually it's the ones that take a long time that are addressing the root causes of stuff. So remember to be patient with yourself and stick with it. So I think that is everything we've got for today for you. If you liked this podcast, please share it with somebody who might find it interesting, or somebody who you think needs to hear this. If you want to find us on social media, or even possibly look into working with us, we do both offer one-on-one consultations. That's a space where we can discuss your personal story. We go in depth and look to uncover and address all of the underlying root causes, all of the contributing factors to your illness, and we help you create a full holistic plan to navigate that. You can connect with us through our websites, or our emails, which are linked in the description. We are both on Instagram. If you know about us, you know about our podcast, but definitely go check out our other episodes. And if you can give us like a like or a rating or a subscribe, that really, really helps us get the word out. And if you have topics that you want us to talk about, if you have questions or curiosities, connect with us. You can, again, like either through our websites, we both have connect pages that just go directly to us. We both have Instagram DMs. You can just pop in there and let us know what you want to learn about. We are like actively thinking of new topics, and we want to make this as useful and applicable to you as possible. So really open to any feedback. And then if you have any ideas and you have any curiosities you want to get a herbalist perspective on, then reach out to us, let us know, and we will add that to our list of episodes. So thanks again for listening, and we will see you next time.